In February 2022, a shocking news rocked the cryptocurrency world. Billions of dollars worth of Bitcoin had been recovered after years of disappearance. But how did this happen? It all started with a bold cyber heist committed in 2016, when hackers infiltrated the digital platform Bitfinex. At the time, Bitfinex was one of the largest cryptocurrency exchanges in the world. Based in the United States but operating in a decentralized manner, it suffered an extremely well-planned attack. More than 119,000 bitcoins were stolen, a value that, at the time, was around $72 million. This was considered one of the largest digital thefts in history, and for many years, authorities had no concrete clues about who was behind the crime. The criminals seemed to have vanished without a trace, and the coins were sleeping in virtual wallets impossible to track. But in 2022, everything changed. The U.S. Department of Justice announced the arrest of a couple accused of being behind the laundering of part of those stolen funds. The revealed identities were surprising. Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan, two young, intelligent, and talented individuals. Together, they formed a seemingly harmless couple, but who held a dangerous secret. The investigation began to take shape when federal agents noticed unusual movements in Bitcoin wallets linked to the Bitfinex hack. Something that seemed impossible. Someone was trying to convert part of the stolen digital fortune into real money. Despite the anonymity offered by cryptocurrencies, technology can also be a powerful weapon against criminals. With the use of advanced blockchain analysis tools, agents managed to trace a path directly leading to the couple. Lichtenstein and Morgan were arrested in February 2022 in New York. At the time of their arrest, they had access to more than 94,000 bitcoins, equivalent at that time to about $3.6 billion. A true digital treasure hidden under a facade of normality. The case reignited the debate on security in the crypto universe. If one of the largest exchanges in the world could be hacked, how secure was the system really? And more importantly, if such skilled criminals could be caught, what is the future of cybercrime? What makes this case even more fascinating is the profile of the accused. They were not anonymous hackers living in the shadows of the internet. On the contrary, they attended tech events, gave lectures, ran legitimate businesses, and even celebrated their eccentric lifestyle on social media. Heather Morgan, in particular, stood out for her online presence. She used the artistic name Razzlecan and posted songs and performances full of irony and cryptographic references. Many thought it was just eccentricity. Today, many see disguised clues in those posts. Ilya, on the other hand, was known for his technical genius. He worked on open-source projects and had solid connections in the programming world. No one imagined he would be involved in an international money laundering scheme. The arrest came as a shock to friends, colleagues, and even family members. How could such intelligent and successful people risk everything for billions in stolen cryptocurrency? That's the question investigators, judges, and digital security analysts are still trying to understand. The U.S. Department of Justice highlighted the complexity of the investigation. It took years of analysis, joint work between international agencies, and the use of increasingly sophisticated digital monitoring techniques. The case showed that, even in the decentralized world of crypto, nobody is completely invisible. This is only the beginning of a story that mixes technology, greed, intelligence, and human error. In the next chapters, we will dive deep into the past of Ilya and Heather, understand how they met, how they built the scheme, and how they almost managed to escape punishment for one of the largest digital heists ever recorded. Ilya Lichtenstein was born in Russia but moved to the United States as a young man. He grew up in a family with a strong technological background and from an early age demonstrated impressive programming and system analysis skills. His brain seemed to function like an advanced computer, capable of solving complex problems with just a few clicks. From high school, Ilya drew attention from teachers and classmates due to his ease in understanding programming languages and cryptographic systems. Many compared him to a technology prodigy, someone who understood the digital world in an almost intuitive way. Despite his genius, Ilya was known to be discreet, quiet, and extremely focused. He preferred to stay behind the scenes, where he could dominate the environment without drawing attention. characteristics that later helped in his illegal activities. Meanwhile, Heather Morgan had a completely different profile. Born and raised in San Antonio, Texas, she was always extroverted, charismatic, and ambitious. She was the kind of person who could stand out in any environment, whether because of her intelligence or her striking personality. Heather studied economics and business, and shortly after college, she founded her own data analysis company. She had an innovative vision on how to use artificial intelligence to detect fraud and improve digital marketing strategies. In addition, Heather was also an artist. She used the pseudonym Razzlecan and created songs, performances, and videos filled with irony, sarcasm, and references to digital culture. Her performances were exotic and caught attention in the crypto and geek underground. She loved expressing herself in different ways. On social media, she posted extravagant images, wore colorful clothes, and rapped about hackers, digital security, and even financial crimes. To many, it was just art. Today, some analysts believe these posts were disguised clues. Ilya and Heather met in the tech world. Their meeting seemed inevitable. He, the quiet genius. She, the bold visionary. Together, they formed a powerful duo. He with technical knowledge, she with strategic vision and charm to convince anyone. In 2015, the couple got married and began living what appeared to be a normal life. They had a legitimate startup, participated in major events in the technology sector, and maintained contacts with influential figures in the crypto world. But behind this facade, something much bigger was happening. Heather's public profile contrasted with Ilya's lifestyle. While she appeared at conferences and festivals, he avoided cameras and interviews. This division between exposure and secrecy may have been part of the plan to keep the scheme hidden for so long. Both had access to advanced technical knowledge. Ilya knew how to manipulate the blockchain, create anonymous wallets, and move large quantities of Bitcoin without leaving obvious traces. Heather, on the other hand, understood how to convert this money into real assets such as real estate and services. Over the years, they built a complex network of transactions and fake accounts. They moved small amounts of Bitcoin from one wallet to another, trying to make tracking difficult. They even used decentralized exchanges and dark wallets, tools created specifically to obscure the history of the coins. But no system is perfect, and it was precisely at this stage that federal agents began noticing suspicious movements. Something seemed out of the ordinary. After all, why were so many low-value transactions connected to wallets linked to the old Bitfinex hack? From that point on, the authorities began to monitor the couple's behavior. They didn't know it yet, but they had been under observation for months. Every step, every movement, every digital transfer was being mapped by experts in cryptography and digital investigation. The attack on Bitfinex happened in August 2016, when the platform was one of the most important cryptocurrency exchanges in the world. Thousands of users stored their Bitcoins there, believing they were safe, but a silent plan was already underway for months. Bitfinex operated mainly online, with decentralized servers, which made direct attacks difficult. But the criminals didn't need to physically invade the company. They found a vulnerability within the internal security system of the exchange itself. The vulnerability was identified in a new feature implemented by Bitfinex called wallet sharing. This tool allowed users to delegate part of the control of their accounts to third parties, something useful, but extremely risky if misconfigured. The hackers discovered that they could exploit this function to access wallets without the actual permission of the owners. With this, they were able to move Bitcoins from other people's accounts to wallets controlled by them, without immediately raising alarms. They started with small transactions, testing the limits of the system. When they saw that no one was closely monitoring these transactions, they gradually increased the volume until, within a few weeks, they had already diverted more than 119,000 Bitcoins. At the time, each Bitcoin was worth about $600, making the stolen amount equivalent to approximately $72 million. A true digital treasure disappearing under the eyes of Bitfinex's security team, and no one noticed until it was too late. What shocked the experts was that the attack was extremely well planned. There were no glaring code flaws or obvious security errors, just an intelligent exploitation of an existing feature, something even the developers themselves hadn't imagined possible. After the theft, the criminals spent years hiding the trail of the coins. They used advanced techniques to launder the digital money, such as splitting the values into small amounts, transferring them between anonymous wallets, and using unregulated exchanges, known as shadow exchanges. Many of these wallets were registered with false information, and some even left no visible history on the blockchain. It was as if the bitcoins had been erased from the map, at least until someone made a mistake. The big mistake came in 2021, when part of these bitcoins began to be moved again. Someone was trying to convert them into real money using legitimate services, and this lit a red light in the digital investigation agencies. With this, American authorities, supported by international blockchain analysis teams, began to trace the path of each transaction. Using advanced tracking technology, they managed to reconstruct the entire flow from the moment of the theft. It was during this analysis that the first indications of Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan's involvement emerged. They had access to wallets directly linked to the original Bitfinex attack, and now they were trying to turn this digital money into real assets. How did they manage to keep so much Bitcoin for so long without being caught? The answer lies in the complexity of the blockchain and the lack of clear regulation on cryptocurrencies at the time. Many exchanges operated without requiring real identification from users, facilitating money laundering. The Bitfinex theft was a turning point for the crypto industry. It showed that even large and reputable platforms could be vulnerable. It also revealed the urgent need for more robust security systems and greater oversight of cryptocurrency transactions. After the Bitfinex hack, the criminals had a huge problem: how to use more than 119,000 bitcoins without being identified. The answer lay in laundering these coins, a complex process involving several steps to make the illegal digital assets appear completely normal. Washing bitcoins isn't as simple as washing traditional money. Each transaction on the blockchain is permanently recorded, leaving a public and immutable history. Therefore, criminals needed to find creative ways to obscure this path. Ilya and Heather used a technique known as mixing, where small amounts of Bitcoin were moved between various different wallets. This made tracking more difficult, as each transfer seemed like part of smaller, legitimate transactions. They also resorted to services known as tumblers or coin mixers, platforms that mix coins from multiple users to hide their origin. These services are widely used by cybercriminals to clean digital funds. Additionally, the couple frequently used shadow exchanges, cryptocurrency exchanges operating off the radar of regulation. On these platforms, it was possible to create anonymous accounts and conduct transactions without identity verification. One of their most intelligent strategies was dividing large amounts of Bitcoin into minimal, almost imperceptible values. Then, these values were sent to multiple wallets, sometimes even to addresses automatically generated by scripts programmed by Ilya. The goal was clear: make any investigator or monitoring system lose control over the real origin of the coins. If each transaction looked common, no one would suspect of criminal activity. But Heather, with her business vision, went even further. She sought to convert part of this digital fortune into real assets, such as real estate, digital art, NFTs, and even investments in legitimate companies. This way, the money began to circulate in the physical world. She also used layering techniques, stacking transactions between different currencies, such as Ether and Tether. This added even more layers of confusion to the original path of the stolen bitcoins. In some cases, she even used freelance service platforms to create fake invoices, simulating payments for services rendered. Thus, it seemed that the money came from legitimate work, when in fact it was the result of digital crime. Ilya, in turn, kept technical control of everything. He managed hundreds of virtual wallets, using custom scripts to automate transfers and ensure none remained inactive for too long, which could raise suspicions. However, it was at this moment that they began making their first mistakes. In 2021, some wallets began showing unusual activity. Small amounts were being converted into dollars through platforms that required KYC, know your customer, that is, identity verification. These conversions left digital trails. And this is what caught the attention of American authorities. A flow of bitcoins directly linked to the Bitfinex theft was reappearing, and now it had a digital signature, that of the couple. Federal agents began gathering evidence. Each transaction, each script used, each login to wallets and exchanges began to be analyzed. They were closing in. But Ilya and Heather still didn't know this, and continued to believe they were one step ahead. The turning point in the investigation occurred in 2021. Despite years without concrete leads, U.S. federal agents began noticing unusual movements in Bitcoin wallets directly linked to the Bitfinex theft. These transactions were being made through legitimate services, something unusual for wallets that should have been dormant for years. The Department of Justice then decided to closely monitor these movements, trying to identify who was behind them. The key to the case was a series of transactions that seemed to follow a specific technical pattern. Agents analyzed the code used to move the bitcoins and discovered it had unique characteristics, something that only a very experienced programmer could have created. Ilya Lichtenstein was known in the programming world for his highly customized and efficient codes. When experts compared the scripts used in the suspicious transactions with other public works of his, they found clear coincidences. At the same time, Heather Morgan began using part of the converted money into real cash for commercial activities. She opened accounts on legitimate platforms, bought digital goods, and even tried to invest in startups. All of this leaving financial trails. She also used social networks to display her extravagant lifestyle. These posts caught the attention not only of followers but also of analysts who were already investigating the case. Some behaviors seemed aligned with those of criminals laundering digital money. Based on this information, the FBI assembled a specialized team to track every step of the couple. They used advanced digital analysis techniques, including IP monitoring, login tracking, and even discrete physical surveillance. One of the biggest blows to the investigation was when agents discovered that Ilya and Heather kept a history of passwords and private keys saved in cloud servers. One of these servers had recently been accessed, and this gave the authorities direct access to irrefutable digital evidence. Additionally, they found records of communications between the couple discussing how to convert the bitcoins into dollars. Encrypted messages, temporary files, and even handwritten notes were recovered during the investigation. In January 2022, the Department of Justice decided to act. The evidence was strong enough to request arrest and seizure warrants. The plan was coordinated. Arrest the couple before they had a chance to hide more funds or destroy evidence. The arrest occurred in February of that year in New York. Ilya and Heather were caught by surprise while at home. Police stormed the apartment and seized electronic devices, documents, notebooks with encrypted notes, and even lists of virtual wallets. During the operation, agents confiscated more than 94,000 bitcoins, a value equivalent to about $3.6 billion at the time. It was the largest seizure of cryptocurrency ever carried out by the U.S. government up to that point. The couple was charged with conspiracy to commit money laundering, unauthorized access to computers, and electronic fraud. If convicted, they would face decades in prison. But beyond that, their reputations were completely destroyed. The case shocked the tech world. Many colleagues and friends were stunned to see that two such intelligent and successful people had become involved in such a complex illegal scheme. For some, it was greed. For others, sheer arrogance. But the story didn't end there. Even after the arrest, questions arose about how many others might be involved. Did Ilya and Heather act alone? Or were they part of an international network of hackers and digital money launderers? With the arrest in February 2022, Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan were taken to the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of New York. There, they would face one of the most complex trials in recent history involving cybercrime and cryptocurrency laundering. The Department of Justice formally charged them with conspiracy to commit money laundering, unauthorized access to computer systems, and obstruction of justice. Each of these charges carried severe penalties, including up to 20 years in prison for some of the more serious offenses. During the initial hearings, the prosecution presented impressive digital evidence. Blockchain transaction records, cloud server logs, conversations between the couple, and even scripts used by Ilya to automate the movement of stolen bitcoins. One of the most impactful moments was when prosecutors displayed in court the complete path the coins had followed since the Bitfinex theft. With interactive graphics, they showed how the funds were laundered over the years. Ilya and Heather initially denied any direct involvement in the original theft. However, they admitted to having knowledge of part of the coins. The defense argued that they had received the bitcoins from third parties without knowing their illegal origin. This legal strategy, however, did not convince the judge. The evidence clearly showed that the couple had full control over the wallets and had used advanced techniques to hide the money trail. This indicated full awareness of the crime. Throughout the process, new revealing data emerged. A server used by Ilya contained detailed notes on how to avoid detection by blockchain analysis tools. These were precise instructions, written by him personally, on how to keep the money invisible. Heather, on the other hand, tried to use her public image to her advantage. Her lawyers requested leniency, saying she was an artist and entrepreneur who was led astray by ambition. But the court rejected this argument, considering her a co-author intellectually and practically of the scheme. The media closely followed the case. Newspapers such as the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, and specialized tech and cybersecurity channels provided constant coverage. The trial became a reference for future cases involving crimes with cryptocurrencies. In addition, the case had international repercussions. Countries such as Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and South Korea monitored the outcome. As many of the users affected by the Bitfinex hack were foreign, there was pressure to return part of the funds to the true victims. In mid-2022, the presiding judge issued the decision. Ilya and Heather would be tried together but would individually answer for their roles in the scheme. Both remained in pretrial detention until the main trial date. The U.S. government also began discussions on how to manage the billions in seized bitcoins. Would it be possible to return them to the affected investors? How could this be done fairly and securely? An additional complication arose. Part of the bitcoins had already been converted into other assets. Real estate, NFTs, investments in companies, all of this needed to be evaluated and possibly reversed to compensate the victims of the original theft. Meanwhile, Bitfinex filed an official request asking for the return of the seized coins. The platform argued that the funds belonged to its customers and therefore should return to the market. But the government did not release access immediately. As the trial approached, American authorities prepared to present a historic case. For the first time, the U.S. judicial system would deal directly with billions in stolen cryptocurrency, setting important precedents for the future of digital regulation. The Bitfinex theft and the arrest of the couple was not just a police story. It was a shock to the entire cryptocurrency industry. Investors, platforms, and even governments began to rethink how they viewed digital security. Before this incident, many users believed that storing their assets on exchanges was safe. But the 2016 theft and the years it took to recover part of the funds showed that this wasn't entirely true. After the attack, Bitfinex underwent a complete overhaul of its security infrastructure. The platform implemented more robust multi-factor authentication systems, improved management of cold wallets, and began requiring external audits. But the impact was much greater than local. Other exchanges around the world began reviewing their own practices. Platforms like Binance, Coinbase, and Kraken announced new layers of protection for users, including transaction behavior analysis and automatic detection of suspicious activity. One of the biggest legacies of the case was the popularization of the concept of secure custody. That is, how to store cryptocurrencies securely. Many exchanges started using offline physical wallets, distributed backup systems, and even insurance against digital theft. In addition, there was a growing movement among individual investors to keep their assets outside of exchanges. The famous motto of the crypto community, "Not your keys, not your coins," gained strength, encouraging more and more people to use personal and decentralized wallets. Governments also began accelerating the creation of stricter rules for the sector. Countries such as the United States, Japan, and Switzerland started requiring exchanges to register full user identification, making it harder for criminals to launder digital money. The U.S. Treasury intensified oversight of unlicensed platforms, known as shadow exchanges. These shadowy exchanges were often used by criminals to hide the origin of illegal funds. In the corporate market, companies that previously avoided entering the crypto universe began to see opportunity, as long as there was security. Major banks such as Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan began offering services related to digital assets, but now with much stricter compliance protocols. The case also accelerated the development of blockchain tracking tools. Specialized companies such as Chainalysis and Elliptic saw their value increase exponentially, as their technologies became essential for police investigations and financial monitoring. With the use of these tools, it became clear that no movement on the blockchain is truly invisible. Even if criminals try to hide the path of the coins, there is always an immutable record that can be analyzed by experts. This changed the mindset of many cybercriminals. Until then, many believed they could act with impunity in the crypto world. Now, with cases like Ilya and Heather's, they realized that total anonymity does not exist. Another significant change was the adoption of early warning systems by exchanges. Today, many of them monitor transactions in real time, comparing behavioral patterns and issuing alerts when they detect unusual or potentially fraudulent movements. The incident also raised ethical questions within the crypto community. Should exchanges have more responsibility for customer security? Could a decentralized yet secure system be created? Despite all the advances, the sector still faces major challenges. Cybercrimes continue to happen, and not all exchanges are equally prepared. But one thing is certain: the case of Ilya and Heather served as a turning point in the history of digital security. When U.S. authorities recovered the 94,000 bitcoins linked to the Bitfinex theft, immediate questions arose. What to do with such a huge digital fortune? How to ensure that it was returned to the rightful owners, if that was still possible? The U.S. Department of Justice was clear from the start. This was not only about punishing the criminals, but also about returning stolen property to the victims. However, this was easier said than done. The coins were stored in virtual wallets, but many of them had been mixed so many times that it was already impossible to accurately identify which part belonged to each investor who had been affected in the original Bitfinex attack. To solve this problem, the government turned to specialized blockchain analysis companies such as Chainalysis and Elliptic. These firms mapped the entire path of the transactions, trying to reconstruct the origin of each group of recovered bitcoins. The process was slow and complex. Each block of the registry chain needed to be verified, compared, and cross-referenced with old Bitfinex data. After all, the goal was to return the right money to the right people. However, not all investors affected by the 2016 theft could be fully reimbursed. Many had lost their access keys or simply gave up claiming their assets, fearing they would never be found. In addition, there was another issue. The value of Bitcoin had increased dramatically between the theft, 2016, and the recovery, 2022. This raised legal debates about whether investors should receive the equivalent in dollars or the actual coins. Meanwhile, the U.S. government made a strategic decision. It would not sell the bitcoins immediately. Instead, it would keep them under federal custody, waiting for the conclusion of investigations and legal definitions regarding their final destination. However, storing billions in cryptocurrency is not simple. Traditional vaults don't work for this. Authorities had to use highly secure systems known as cold storage, offline storage, to prevent any attempt at another theft. The U.S. Treasury also began working on clear guidelines on how to deal with seized digital assets. This case would be a milestone for future operations involving cryptocurrencies and cybercrime. One of the first measures was to create a compensation program for Bitfinex customers. The platform contacted its registered users, requesting documentary proof to validate possible claims. But not everything went smoothly. Some investors faced bureaucratic difficulties proving their previous ownership. Others died before seeing their money recovered. And there were even cases where fraudsters tried to pass themselves off as legitimate victims. Over time, the government and Bitfinex began releasing small amounts of Bitcoin to the first beneficiaries. Each transfer was carefully monitored, avoiding market impacts from sudden large-scale sales. Still, a new discussion arose: what to do with the bitcoins that no one claimed. Part of the analysts suggested that the government auction them off, using the proceeds to fund digital crime-fighting programs. Another faction advocated keeping those funds as a strategic reserve, preparing for future crises or similar attacks. Either way, one thing was clear: the world had changed, and now governments knew exactly how to handle large sums in cryptocurrency. The case of the billion-dollar Bitcoin theft and the arrest of the couple was much more than a police story. It represented a historical turning point in the fight against digital crime. It showed the world that even in decentralized systems, justice can act. Governments around the world began to view the crypto sector through a new lens, not as something invisible or uncontrollable, but as a space that, although complex, can be monitored and regulated with the right tools. One of the biggest legacies of the case was the acceleration of public policy creation aimed at digital security. Countries such as the United States, Japan, and Switzerland began to require greater transparency from exchanges and greater international cooperation between intelligence agencies. In addition, there was increasing pressure on smaller, unlicensed crypto platforms, the so-called shadow exchanges. Many of them were investigated for facilitating money laundering, tax evasion, and other cybercrimes. The U.S. Treasury intensified its actions against these platforms, using sanctions and financial blocks to limit their access to the global banking system. The goal was clear: make it increasingly difficult for criminals to operate anonymously. There were also significant advances in user identification rules. Today, most exchanges require full KYC, know your customer, including personal documents, photos, and even biometric verification. This makes it much harder for criminals to enter the system. However, not all changes were well received by the crypto community. Many privacy advocates saw this as a threat to individual freedom and the original concept of decentralized currencies. Despite these concerns, the consensus is that the sector needs balance, security without suffocating innovation. And this has become a major challenge for governments, businesses, and investors around the world. The use of artificial intelligence and predictive analysis also gained momentum. Specialized companies began using algorithms capable of detecting suspicious transaction patterns, helping to prevent crimes before they happen. These technologies are being integrated directly into exchanges, allowing them to identify unusual activities in real time. Some already use automated systems that suspend accounts as soon as potentially fraudulent activity is detected. But the biggest impact of the case was psychological. Criminals who once believed they could act with impunity in the crypto world now know that is not true. The message is clear: no one is invisible on the blockchain. On the other hand, new forms of digital crime are emerging. Hackers are exploiting NFTs, smart contracts, and even governance tokens to hide illegal funds. The game is constantly evolving, and authorities need to stay one step ahead. The future promises even more advances. Global regulation projects, such as MiCA markets and crypto assets, from the European Union, aim to create a single standard for the sector, ensuring transparency and consumer protection on an international scale. With this, the crypto world is moving into a new phase. Less anarchic, safer, and more regulated. But the balance between control and freedom will remain a central theme in the coming years, and cases like that of Ilya and Heather will be remembered as milestones of this transformation. The case of Ilya Lichtenstein and Heather Morgan was not just another digital crime. It showed us how technology can be used both to commit crimes and to combat them. It was a clear example that nobody is truly invisible in the world of cryptocurrencies. Even with advanced money laundering techniques, custom scripts, and anonymous wallets, the couple ended up being discovered. And that happened thanks to the joint work of investigators, blockchain experts, and international intelligence agencies. This story teaches us that the blockchain, although decentralized and secure, is also immutable. Every transaction will leave a trail forever. That means that even years later, it is possible to reconstruct the entire path of a digital asset and identify who was behind it. Another big lesson is that greed can lead even brilliant people to make catastrophic decisions. Ilya and Heather had everything to succeed legitimately, but chose a risky and illegal path, and now pay the price for it. The case also exposed the weaknesses of crypto exchanges at the time. Bitfinex was hacked because it had a security flaw it didn't even realize. Today, many platforms are much better prepared, but the warning remains: digital security is something constant. For investors, the message is clear: never fully trust third parties. If you don't control your private keys, technically you don't own your assets. The motto, "not your keys," not your coins has never been more relevant. We also learned that governments are increasingly involved in the crypto universe. The case served as a turning point for public policies, regulations, and surveillance. Digital currencies are no longer just the concern of programmers or enthusiasts, they are part of the global economy. And we cannot forget the victims. Thousands of people lost bitcoins in 2016, thinking they would never see their money again. But the recovery of part of those funds brought hope and reinforced the importance of keeping records, backups, and updated documents. This is a reminder that time does not erase digital crimes. Crimes committed today can be discovered tomorrow, and those who act wrongly need to be aware that the blockchain does not forgive. On the other hand, the case also shows that the judicial system still needs to evolve to deal with complex digital assets. Judging crypto-related crimes requires technical knowledge, understanding of blockchain, and a new legal vision on property and digital responsibility. Specialized blockchain analysis companies such as Chainalysis and Elliptic have become key players in this new game. They help governments and exchanges map transactions, detect fraud, and prevent new attacks, and their role will only grow. At the same time, criminals are adapting. Now they seek more sophisticated ways to hide transactions, exploring smart contracts, NFTs, and even private networks within the crypto ecosystem. The fight against digital money laundering has become a cat-and-mouse game. But there is hope. With more awareness, better security practices, and stronger oversight, the future of cryptocurrencies can be more transparent, fair, and accessible to all. The important thing is to learn from cases like this and move forward wisely. If you are an investor, developer, entrepreneur, or simply curious about the crypto world, this story serves as both a warning and a learning experience. Take care of your assets, keep your information secure, and never underestimate the power of technology allied with justice. And now we reach the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed this journey through the world of digital crime, cybersecurity, and cryptocurrencies. If you did, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like it, share it with someone who loves technology and digital security, and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. Turn on the bell icon to receive notifications and stay up to date with all the latest news. See you in the next video.